This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Meeting, and they have the following exchange. Officer says, "Sir, driver's license." Says, "Driver's license? Come on, I don't have a driver's license. My license was suspended after my 5th DUI." He said, "What? Your 5th DUI? Sir, do you own this car?" "Do I own this car? Of course I don't own the car. I stole the car." "Sir, who owns the car?" I said, "I don't know who owns the car. I think I saw the owner's card in the glove compartment where I put my gun." "What? You have a gun in the glove compartment?" I said, "Of course I have a gun. After I shot that lady and put her in the trunk, I put the gun in the glove compartment." "Sir, there's a body in your trunk?" "Yeah." So the officer is startled. He doesn't know what to do. He calls the sergeant. All of a sudden, within minutes, the car is circled by policemen. The sergeant comes in. "Sir, license, please." He pulls out of his wallet, perfectly valid driver's license. "Sir, is this your car?" "Of course it's my car. Here's my registration." Registration was valid. "Sir, kindly open up your glove compartment very slowly. There's word that there's a gun." "There's a gun?" Opens up the glove compartment. There's no gun. "Is there a body in your trunk?" "Body in my trunk? What are you talking about?" He opens up the trunk. There's no body. Sergeant says, "I don't get it, sir. The officer who stopped you told me that your driver's license was suspended, you have a gun in the glove compartment, you stole the car, and there's a body in the trunk." "Yeah, he also probably told you I was speeding, right?" Lying. According to the media, everyone is doing it. It's rampant. But it's a sign of the times. After all, we're living at the precipice of history. We're living in an era known as Ikvasa de Mashiach. We hear the footsteps of Mashiach. And the Mishnah says at the end of Masechta Soita that one of the telltale signs of the Ikvasa de Mashiach is HaEmet ne'ederes. Truth will be lacking. And you look around American society today and you see how low we've fallen when it comes to truth-telling. The American public at large has gotten used to the fact that their politicians and their government will routinely lie to them and try to cover up. According to the Wall Street Journal, 40% of all resumes are phony. The American Academy of Scientists took a poll. 1 out of every 4 scientists in this country feel that their peers lie in their research papers. Some would even go so far as to say that lying is the great American pastime. And now you're thinking, "Rabbi, I think you're taking this a little too far. Come on, this is a country built on integrity, honesty, morals. After all, our very first president, George Washington, he's a well-known ish emes, a man who never told the lie. Isn't it an important part of American cultural heritage that when Washington was 6 years old, his father gave him an axe as a present, whereupon he took the axe and chopped down his father's cherry tree. When his father discovers what he had done, he's furious and he confronts the young boy, and of course young George bravely says, "I cannot tell a lie. I cut down your cherry tree." Washington's father embraces him, he hugs him, he rejoices, and he says, "Honesty is worth more than 1,000 cherry trees." The irony, though, is that this story about Washington's honesty is a complete fabrication. Lai haya v'lai nivra, it never happened. It's a big lie. It's not even based on a true story. It's not even based on a kernel of truth. What happened was, it was invented by Washington's first biographer, an itinerant minister, a bookseller named Mason Locke Weems. When Washington died in 1799, many people were anxious to learn more about his private life. Everyone knew about his public persona. And Weems rightly assumed that if he wrote a popular book about Washington, it would sell. And he was right. So Weems spun this tale about Washington. A tale that has endured for more than 200 years. How ironic that the one story in American history about a president being honest is a complete lie. And if there's one area in society where lying is so pervasive, it's in business. From the oft-repeated line, the check is in the mail, to the guiding principle of American business, can you get away with it, or are you going to get caught? We live in a world that's an olam sheker. But unfortunately, we too have fallen prey. We are not immune to it. I'm not just talking about the Bernie Madoff saga, a name that even though the saga is a number of years ago, it's a name that everyone in this room cringes when they hear that name. But in the past, front pages of the newspaper, sometimes you would see some mafioso being carried away by the FBI, or a member of an organized crime syndicate. But today, it's not mobsters on the front cover of the pages. Layalenu, sometimes it's the Orthodox Jew. Sometimes in the full religious regalia. And this doesn't mean we're off the hook, because they're the ones who are caught. There was a time in this country where people looked forward to doing business with Orthodox Jews. Is that true any longer? I heard on one of Rabbi Fran's Teshuvah Drashas, he quoted a statement of Lawrence Tish, the chairman and CEO of CBS and the Loaf Corporation. Lawrence Tish said, "It's a good thing the Reichmans had an impeccable reputation for honesty. Because if not, they'd be chasing Jews out of every country in the world." We could point to the Reichmans and say, yeah, they were Erlich Yidden. But what's with the rest of us? What kind of Chil Hashem is it? What kind of disgrace is it to hear from Yidden, from Jews, that they prefer to do business with Goyim than with other Yidden? You know what kind of Chil Hashem that is? Let me tell you over a smag. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, Rav Moshe Mikutzi, one of the Bali Toises, he writes in Mitzvah Sasei Ayin Daled, the mitzvah of returning lost objects. He writes, Ki ata sheherich hagolos yoiser midai. Now that the golos has extended for so long, Yesh li Yisrael lechois be'emes. The Jewish people need to grab a hold of, the correct pronunciation is not emes, it's ms, but in the vernacular we'll say ms. B'shaloi l'shaker loy li Yisrael v'loy l'goyim. We need to be careful not to lie to Jews and not to lie to goyim. V'loy l'hatoisam b'shum inyan, and not to trick a Gentile in any way. Avlam yisnahagu im hagoyim b'ramos. Says something very frightening. If we act with Gentiles in a deceiving way, Kishayavai HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hoshiyim, when Hashem comes to save us, Yoimru Hagoyim, the Gentiles will say, Ma Osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's God doing? Shebachar Lechelkoi Ganovim Uramoim. Why did God choose a bunch of thieves? Apparently, we're going to have to shape up before Mashiach comes. Rav Schwab points out, you look in the Webster's dictionary, you don't want to say anything Chas Hashem about Klal Yisrael, but this is what it says. What's the definition of Jew? Verb, to be conniving, deceiving, to engage in sharp practices. So for Mashiach to come, there's going to have to be a new definition in the dictionary for Jew. One who is scrupulously honest. When Mato Katz, Rosh Hashiva tells, had a conversation with a irreligious Jew, and the Jew asked Mato, how do you explain Rosh Hashiva, the phenomenon of religious Jews who cheat on their taxes, on their income tax return? So Mato says, what do you mean? How do you explain the phenomenon of religious Jews who eat on Yom Kippur and drive on Shabbos? So the man looks at him, Rosh Hashiva, you know better. Those are not religious Jews. Rav Matel says, and neither are those. Story, it would be humorous if it wasn't true. A Rav who serves as a chaplain in the prisons, he related that he brought a lulav and esrog to one of the inmates. The guy takes a look at the lulav and esrog. He says, "Excuse me, I'm makbid on a pitum." How do we get to this level of disconnect? You have a guy who's makbid on a pitum, but not on stealing. How could some people eat only under the best hechsherim? They won't eat gebrakst on Pesach, but there's no concept of emes in business. And we can't justify the behavior, but it is that it does call for some kind of explanation where this behavior comes from. And very likely, it's the result of thousands of years of conditioning. For 2,000 years, we've been persecuted in every way, including forbidding us to partake in any type of commerce. For 2 millennia, we had no rights, and we were forced, nebuch, to look for every possible loophole, for every possible deal, to resort to bribery and other illicit activities. But we don't live in communist Russia anymore. And this is not Nazi Germany. This is the United States of America. And all the shtick, and the chaps, and the kvetches, and the loopholes, which may have been justified in other eras, they're not halachically acceptable. And they're nothing short of a major chil Hashem. Aren't we supposed to be a light unto the nations? Aren't we supposed to be showing an example to the rest of the world of what honesty is? You know, one of the well-known survivors of the Holocaust, Yosef Friedenson, is the editor of Das Yiddish Shavart. My grandfather was very well acquainted with him. And on one occasion, he was recounting some of his wartime experiences, and he said over the following story. When he was in Auschwitz, there was a Yid in the bunk, a Yid by the name of Rabbi Binyamin, a tzaddik. He's an Ungarish Yid, a Hungarian Jew. And the way this Yid used to say karbanos, the way he used to daven with bechiyos, demois, it was like from another world. Noira noirais. And Yosef Friedenson said he came very close to this Yid. And one day they were given barrack duty. And they were ordered to clean up the barrack and stay behind. So Yosef said they were cleaning up the barracks. They were sweeping up, and in the corner of the room, lo and behold, a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread in Auschwitz. Now first you have to realize, what's a loaf of bread in Auschwitz? There's an account of someone who describes what it was like when Jews were shipped in to Auschwitz from Western Europe. From Eastern Europe they were put on cattle cars. But when they came from France, they put them a nicer transportation, and they came dressed very nicely. And one of the accounts writes that he saw an international banker who came with his fur coat, with his high silk hat. He gets off the train. 2 or 3 weeks later, saw the same man, emaciated, starving, shivering in the cold, in his striped prisoner's uniform. And the man says he saw this man take a German into the corner. The German was smoking a cigarette, and he whips out of his pocket a velvet pouch. He empties out the velvet pouch, and diamonds poured out on the pouch. And the German pockets the diamonds, and in exchange he gave him a loaf of bread. This is what a loaf of bread was in Auschwitz. And here 2 starving Yidden found a loaf of bread. And Rabbi Binyamin says, Yasala, I know who the bread belongs to. There's a Polak, a Polish anti-Semit, who hid away the bread. Yasal, Lamer Tzurik Eben der Breit. Let's give him the bread back. Sollen der Goyim zogin Yidin zenen ishkanovim. Let the Goyim say Jews are not stealers. And with the purity of a Yiddish neshama, and with the koyach of only someone who carries within him a chelek elakam imal, they went and they took the loaf of bread and they gave it back to the guy. And the guy went around telling people, Yidin zenen nishkein ganovim. Rabbi say, are we doing enough that they should still say that about us? But there's a fatal mistake that we still make. We think somehow, with all the shtick, that's going to make us the extra buck. That's going to give us the breathing room, the comfort that we need. And we don't realize, pink fakert, ibcha mistabra, it's just the opposite. This ain't where the extra buck is coming from. It's so interesting. You know, all the Avos HaKadoshim, they were all very, very wealthy. But do you know who the wealthiest of all the Avos was? Yaakov Avinu. By Abraham it says, V'Avraham kaved ma'od ba'mikneh ba'kesef u'vazav. Abraham was very wealthy. By Yitzchak it says, V'yigdal ha'ish haloich v'yelech haloich v'gadol ad ki gadol ma'od. Yitzchak was also very wealthy. But as wealthy as they were, we find Yaakov Avinu was even more wealthy. By Yaakov it says, Vayifroi toyish me'oid, me'oid, vayihiloit soin, rabbis, ushvachos, va'avadim, ugamalim, v'chamoyim. Me'oid. Very, very wealthy. Why was that? Why was Yaakov Avinu so wealthy? Why was he zoicha to more wealth than any of the other avos? Well, simply you would say that not only was Yaakov wealthy, he had family money also. Abraham was wealthy, Yitzchak was wealthy. He not only had his own wealth, he had the family estate. But if you look in the Rambam, in Hilchos Chiros, Parak Yud Gimel, Halacha Zayin, the Rambam reveals to us the secret of the wealth of Yaakov Avinu. Let me read to you the words of the Rambam. Just like a balabayas, the employer is commanded not to withhold wages from the worker. The worker is commanded not to be a cheat. And take an extra coffee break here, and take an extra paper clip over there. And use the internet half the day. You need to be very careful on the time of the boss. You can't be lazy. You work with all your might. Shaharei Yaakov Hatzadik. You hear such a language? Nowhere in Chazal is Yaakov called Tzaddik, other than the Rambam. And he's not called a Tzaddik because he learned for 14 years in Yeshiva Shema Eber. That's not what made him a Tzaddik. You know what made him a Tzaddik? When he worked for Lavan honestly. Says the Rambam. And Yaakov worked for Lavan with all of his strength. Therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom rewarded him also in this world. Shenemar vayifroitz ha'ish me'oid me'oid. The Rambam is saying that why was Yaakov zoicher to such exceptional wealth? Business integrity. He was hired to be a shepherd, and he did the job honestly. He didn't cut corners. He didn't take extended coffee breaks. He didn't use the company phone to make long-distance phone calls. He didn't leave early and come back at the end of the day to check out. Yaakov says, B'chol koichi avadati es avichan. Yaakov says, Terefa lo hevesi elecha anoichi achaten. If there's any damage, Yaakov put it on his cheshbon. Hayisi bayoim achalani choyrev. He didn't take snow days. Batidat shnasim, when he was tired, he worked just as hard. He didn't take paper clips when the boss wasn't looking. His billing wasn't exaggerated. Says the Rambam, when someone keeps to the rules, when someone works honestly, says Rebbeinu Shalom, you're not bending the rules, I'll bend the rules. The normal rules are schara b'hayam aleka, I don't reward you in this world. But you went against human nature, and you went with the rules, I will break the rules. And I'll reward you even in this world. Business integrity is such an important quality of a Jew. I'll even reward you in this world, says Rabbi. And you know what? Wealth was not the only benefit that accrued to Yaakov Avinu. So you look in the beginning of Parsha Vayetze, Yaakov Avinu has his momentous dream, the epic dream, the dream of the ladder that reached the heavens, and he sees the malachim in his dream. What a spiritual, lofty, elevated experience. What a great madrega Yaakov must have been on. But what should really pique your curiosity is the fact that at the end of the parasha, he's not seeing angels anymore in dreams. He's seeing them awake. He's seeing them on the street. Yaakov halach ladarkoi vayifku boy malachei Elokim. Very remarkable. What changed? What did Yaakov Avinu do in the interim that elevated him from seeing malachim in a dream to seeing malachim on the street? I mean, he would bump into Michal. Michal would say, "How you doing? Vasa? Was is nice? Was titzach, Yaakov?" I mean, this wasn't a chalom. This wasn't a nevuah. He saw malachim. His learning in Yeshiva Shem Va'ever was even before the dream of the ladder. That means learning 14 years did not elevate him to the level to see malachim in real life. So what was he doing in Parshas Vayetze that elevated him to such a madrega? Says Harav Avigdor Miller Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. The Torah only reveals to us one achievement of Yaakov during the 22 years. All the Torah reveals to us is that Yaakov Avinu was a loyal worker. He worked honestly. He had business integrity. And working with integrity is from the highest of spiritual accomplishments. Sometimes a person thinks, I could daven 3 times a day, I could go to a shiur, but most of my day I'm involved in the physical world, most of my day I'm working. And to the sensitive Jew, to the sensitive neshama, it's a bit depressing to spend so much of one's life and not have greater opportunities for spiritual growth. But what we learn from Yaakov Avinu is that working honestly, business integrity is one of the greatest opportunities for spiritual elevation. But I want to bring to your attention that the point we are trying to make today, it's more than just business integrity. It's more than just money. It's much deeper than that. We're talking about pure honesty. It's about MS. And even more importantly, it's about you. You know how the Chofetz Chaim got smicha? Chofetz Chaim once applied for a passport to travel from Poland to Eretz Yisrael. And in the passport application, you have to write down what you are. So what's the Chofetz Chaim? He's a rabbi. There's only one problem. Chofetz Chaim didn't have smicha. So he couldn't write rabbi. Because it wasn't true. So the Chofetz Chaim sent a message to Reb Chaim Ozer. And Chaim Ozer sent him a telegram, smicha. And that's how the Chofetz Chaim got smicha. But he wouldn't just write rabbi. I mean, you look in the telephone books in some places. It's like, everyone's a right. Yersha Kulei Rabbanim. Rebelio Lapian. No? He was an Eral Chayid. He was every year the Baal Musaf until the end of his life. And he would begin Musaf like everybody else. Hineni, Haoni, Nimas, here I am. Empty of good deeds. Nirash v'nivchad mipachad yoshev tehilos Yisrael. Trembling in front of the Rebbe Shalom. Rebbe Eliyah Lapian didn't say those words. He didn't say Nirash v'nivchad mipachad yoshev tehilos Yisrael, because he held it wasn't true. He couldn't say about himself that he was trembling before God, because it wasn't emes. He took out the words. Rav Eliyahu Lapian's Hineni went, Hineni ha'ani mimas basi l'chalos l'chanein l'chanein. Because the word meant something. And I ask you, and what would have been so terrible if the Chavetz Chaim would have written Rabbi, even if he didn't officially have to? I mean, come on. He's not a rabbi. And what would have been so terrible if Rabbi Eliyahu Lapian said the words Nirash v'nivchad, even if he didn't feel he was quite quaking and shaking before Hashem? I mean, he's not hurting anyone. Aren't we blowing this whole thing way out of proportion? But I want to refer you to a well-known story that we're all familiar with. You know, Rivka tells Yaakov, Avinu, listen up, listen well. Yitzchak plans on giving the brachas to Esav, but you got to do something about it. So go take 2 goats, and I'll prepare it the way your father likes, and you'll bring it to him, and he'll give you the bracha. And Yaakov says, Ma, there's only one problem. Ula yemusheni avi. Esav's a hairy guy. I'm smooth. Maybe my father will feel me, v'hayisi b'yeinav kimsateya, and I'll be in his eyes like an imposter. Says Gemara in Sanhedrin Tzadi Beis. Kol hamachlef b'diburai, anyone who's not honest with their word, ki'ilu oived avodah zara. It says about Yaakov being an imposter, and it says about Oivdei Avodah Zara, Hevel Hema Mase Tatuim, to teach that lying is like worshipping idols. In the perspective of the Torah, lying is not just some little thing; it's a crack in the human personality. And if you want to know how far this goes, listen to this. There's a story, Parsha brings it down. Sechta Sanhedrin, in the name of the Baal HaIkrim. There was a robber, a ganav, a thief, and he wants to do Teshuvah. And he comes to a Chacham, he says, look, I'm too far gone to do Teshuvah, but give me some advice. So the Chacham says, look, don't do Teshuvah. Just accept upon yourself one thing. Ganav says, for example. So the Chacham says, accept upon yourself that whatever you say will be true. Don't lie. God says, not a problem. The Chacham says, sure you could do it? He says, yeah. As long as I could continue my routine, I could continue to rob, I'll tell absolutely the truth. So, a little while later, Ganav is on his way to rob a bank, and he's stopped by someone. He says, the guy says to the Ganav, hey, where are you going? So, he remembers that he accepted upon himself only to say the truth. He said, actually, I'm going to Citibank on Union Turnpike, 180th. I'm going to rob the bank. Good. Have a good day. He continues to go on the way, and he bumps into another person. Sir, where are you headed? And again, he remembered his commitment. He said, I'm going to Union Turnpike, 180th. I'm going to rob Citibank. Then it hits him. Now 2 people know what he's about to do. They could serve as Eidim, they could testify against him in a court of law, they could incriminate him. And the story goes, says the Baal HaIkrim, this Ganav did Teshuvah and he did a Teshuvah Shlei. One problem with the story though. Just because this robber accepted upon himself always to speak the truth, doesn't mean that he has to tell people that he's going to rob a bank. They didn't ask him what he's going to be doing there. They asked him where he's going. So let him say, I'm going to the city. I'm going to the bank. I'm going to Union Turnpike at 180th. Nobody asked him to solicit that information. They didn't ask him what he's doing. They asked him where he's going. So our Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Henach Leibowitz, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, he said, you see, from the Baal HaIkrim, that if the Ganav would have simply responded, I'm going to Union Turnpike at 180th, that would have been sheker. Sheker. That's where he was going. No. Because that would have given the impression that he's going for innocent reasons. And even though the questioner really could care less why he's going there and what he's going to do there, it doesn't matter. If you say you're going somewhere, and that would give the impression you're going for innocent reasons, and the person would mistakenly get the impression that you're not going there to steal, that is not MS. MS is not only what you say, it's even the way people construe your words. If people will have a misinterpretation of what you're saying, you're a liar. You're a shakra. We're all familiar with the famous incident of the two mothers who come before Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, and they're fighting, they're contending that the baby in question belonged to them. This one said it's mine, that one said it's theirs. So Shlomo says, you know what? Cut the baby in half. And one woman says, yeah, that's a good idea. Yachloiku, shnayim orchsam betalas. And the other woman cries out, no, don't do that. Give her the child. And then Shlomo rules, that's the mother. Tenula es hayalat hakai, v'hames lo yisamisu. That's the mother. He imai. You know, it reminds you of the story of the two families. They both have a daughter in Shidduchim, and they both get a call from the Shadchan that they have a wonderful boy, and they're very excited to meet the prospective Shidduch. And somehow, amid the confusion, only one boy makes it on the train, and the two mother-in-laws, they head to the train station, each one expecting to find the prospective Shidduch, and they see there's only one boy there. And he's a handsome guy, he looks pretty smart, looks intelligent. They both pounce on him. He's mine, he's for my daughter. They don't know what to do. They schlep the guy to the Rav, and the Rav strokes his beard. He said, we're going to have to bring the shechita knife. Why? To cut him in half. Yachloiku. So one woman said, no, you can't do that. Let her have it. And the other woman said, no, cut him. The Rav says, aha, she's the mother-in-law. Give it to her. In any event, the Gemara says in Masechta Makkos, Daf Chav Gimel, the Gemara has a kasha. The Gemara asks, listen to this. How could Shlomo say, he imai, she's the mother? Can he definitely say that she's the mother? Does Shlomo know for sure she's the mother? How could he say he imai? And the Gemara says, no, he didn't say it. He imai was a bas kol that confirmed the psak of Shlomo HaMelech. And the question is, what do you mean, how could Shlomo say he imai? He's the wisest of all men. He had clear birurim, he had clear proofs based on evidence that this was the correct mother. And the evidence was so clear, the pasuk says, that when all of Klal Yisrael heard the judgment that Shlomo judged them, V'yarum ibnei Amelch, they were afraid of the king. Kiro ki chachmas elakim b'kirbai. They saw he had divine wisdom. La'asais mishpat. So why couldn't Shlomo say he imai? If he could paskin to give it to her, can he say the words he imai? Again, says Rav Henach Leibowitz, even though Shlomo had clear proofs that she's the mother, clear enough that he could paskin based on it, he could award the child to her with a clear conscience. Nevertheless, it's not 1,000% that she's the mother. And when you talk, you can't make a statement unless you're 1,000% sure. Yes, he can give her the child, but to say he imai, he wasn't there when she gave birth to him. The Torah has a different perspective of MS. And in the Torah standard of MS, it's different than the way we're accustomed to thinking. If a statement that's completely true may mislead someone, it's sheker. If a statement can only be supported but not verified, it's not MS. So I think we see very clearly the Torah has a very high standard when it comes to MS. The bar is set very high. But still, why? Why is the bar set so high? Is it really so terrible? A little white lie. How do we wrap our minds around it? And to understand this, and to appreciate this, we need to learn 8 words of Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina, in the Sefer Shari Teshuvah, Rabbeinu Yoina, one of the great Rishonim, who's the first cousin of Ramban. The Ramban writes about Rabbeinu Yoina in the Teshuvah's Ramban and Siman Reish Pei Daled. Rabbeinu Yoina is Ish Elokim Kadoshu. Chida says in the Shem HaGedolim about the Shari Teshuvah, the Shari Teshuvah are the gates of excellence. to inspire the heart for Yiras Shamayim. The holy words of Shari Teshuvah can break even the heart of stone. Fortunate is one who learns from the Sefer Shari Teshuvah daily. And in fact, Reb Chaim Volozhiner said that there are many Musar Svarim. And different Svarim speak to different people. Some people are inspired by Mesilas Yesharim. Others connect more with the Chayvos Havavos. But says Reb Chaim, there's only one Musar Sefer that has universal appeal and will enjoy universal appeal till the end of time. And that's the Shari Teshuvah. Every Jew can connect with Shari Teshuvah. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, Shari Teshuvah, Shar Gimel, Ois Pei Dalet. He's speaking about the infraction of tricking a guy. B'nis chayavnu al gidrei ha'emes. We are obligated in the ideal of truth. Kihu miyasoidei hanefesh. Because truth is the foundation of the soul. You ever wonder, hey, what's my soul made out of? What's my neshama made out of? What is the neshama? Says Rabbeinu Yoina, your neshama is made out of emes. Your neshama is absolute truth. And therefore it's very sensitive to anything that's not truth. It's hypersensitive to falsehood. And that is why to lie and to cheat and not to be forthcoming is destructive to the soul. Something happens to the soul. It hurts the neshama. Lying hurts us on the deepest level of our essence. Because emes is miyasoidei hanefesh. But let's ask a question. It's a daring question. It's a question that takes some guts. How does Rabbeinu Yoina know this? Who told Rabbeinu Yoina that my neshama is made out of emes? I mean, what? He took an MRI of the neshama. He took a sonogram. He took an X-ray. How does he know what the neshama is made out of? Where did he get it from? But I believe the answer is very obvious. Because where does our neshama come from? Vayipach biyapav nishmas chayim. God Almighty blew our souls into us. Says the Zayar man de nafach midilei nafach. One who blows from within themselves. And if you blow into a balloon and you fill it up with air, the air in the balloon came from within you. And that means our neshama is a breath of Hashem. We are a chelek elokah mima. We are a piece of the divine. We're a piece of God. And what is Hashem? What's Hashem? Hashem has many attributes. It's Kelrachum v'chanim. Hashem is a Baal Chesed. Chesed Hashem Malach Haaretz. But of all the midos of Hashem, what's Hashem's hallmark? Midah. What's his signature? Midah. Says the Gemara, Chai Samai Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, emes. The signature of the Ribbono Shel Olam, the trademark of the Ribbono Shel Olam. If there's one midah that defines Hashem, Ki Ata Elokim Emes, we say in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening, Udevarcha Emes. That's the signature midah of Hashem, says the Marsha. When God created the world like an artist, like an architect, like a sculptor who signs his product. Bereishis bara Elokim Soifei Tevois Emes. God signs his name at the end. The end of creation, Asher bara Elokim la'asois. Bara ends in an aleph. Elokim ends in a mem. La'asois ends in a taf. Chai samai shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. And if the trademark of Hashem, if the hallmark of Hashem, if the signature midah of Hashem is emes, and we, and our neshamas, are a piece of Hashem, are a chelek elokah, then you know what our neshamas are made out of. It says Rabbeinu Yoina, your neshama is made out of emes. B'nis chayavnu al gidrei ha'emes kihu miyasoidei hanefesh. And therefore the neshama, which is a virtual piece of truth, is very sensitive, even to the slightest. most minute, microscopic deviance from the truth. And when a Yid is anything but impeccably honest, oh, how it hurts the neshama so deeply. And this idea helped me understand on a deeper level a comment of the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lutzato on the Mesilas Yesharim, Parak Yud Aleph. He quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya, Parak Samach Gimel, pasuk Ches, I believe. We just learned it the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. Vayomer Ach Ami Hema, and he said, Hashem said, they are my people. Bonim lo yeshakeru, children that don't lie. And we assume this means these are two independent clauses. God said we're His people, and God said we're children who don't lie. Says Ramchal, no, these are not two independent clauses. One hinges on the other. When are we God's people? When are we God's children? When we don't lie. Says Ramchal, Ha lamadata shezeh toloi bezeh. When are we the Am Hashem? When are we Banim Lashem? When we're lo yishakeru. I don't get that. I don't understand that. Why would our relationship with Hashem be dependent on telling the truth? Is He our Father or is He not our Father? Sometimes, they ask you, are these your kids? So you say it depends, right? Depends on how they're behaving. But it doesn't really depend. They're your kids. So are we Hashem's kids? We're not His kids. It can't depend. It can depend. Because the answer is, what's a father? A father is someone who shares the same genetic code as a child. A father is someone who has the same DNA as a child. Hashem is a Kel Emes, and we are His children. You know why? Because we share the same genetic code. We share the same DNA. The neshama is also Emes. But when we deviate from the truth, we're tampering with the DNA. We're tampering with the genetic code. We're tampering with our identity. And therefore we're tampering with the relationship we have with the Rebbeinu Shalom. During these days, foremost on our minds, Chayim, life. Zacharinu l'chayim. Kasveinu b'sefer achayim. Please, Rebbeinu Shalom, inscribe us all in the book of life. Well, says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadi Zayin. You want life? It's a very interesting city. The name of the city was Kushta. In that city, no one ever lied, and no one died young. And the Gemara says one time Amara married a lady from there, and they had 2 children. And one time the lady was in the shower, and somebody knocked on the door looking for her, and the husband felt it wouldn't be derech to say she's bathing, so he said, she's not around. Both kids died. The town was in an uproar. People don't die young in the city. And they inquired. And he told them the story. And they told him, it's been nice knowing you. Get out of here. Get lost and don't let the door hit you on your way out. Says the Marsha, truth is the merit for life. Emes. You can't tamper with it. What happens when you tamper with Emes? What happens when you just remove the smallest letter from Emes? When you take the Aleph out of Emes, what do you get? You get the opposite of Chaim. You want a zchus for Chaim? Emes. No midah is so generally associated. If there's any gadol who personified honesty and integrity, a gadol who named his Sefer Emes Yaakov because of his insistence on Emes, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, no midah is associated with Rabbi Yaakov like the midas ha'emes. Rabbi Yaakov lived to a ripe old age, 95. When asked for the secret of his longevity, he said, I never said a lie. Someone asked Rabbi Yaakov a shaila. Every year he would take a personal day on Purim so that he could be mekayim the mitzvahs properly, hear the Megillah, daven like a mensch, give out shalach manos, and eat the Suda with his family. And one year his office was particularly busy, and the employer said, look, this year there are no personal days during this period of time, which included Purim. So the man asked Rabbi Yaakov, look, the day after Tainus Esther, nobody really feels good. And during the Suda's Purim, after, everyone's a chayla. So, I'd like to call in sick in the morning, this way I'd be able to mekayim the mitzvahs hayom properly. Rabbi Yaakov said, nothing doing. Purim? Purim is a d'Rabbanan. Midvar sheker tirchak. That's a d'Oraisa. You don't observe a d'Rabbanan by transgressing an Isser d'Oraisa. You go to work. Purim is important. MS is more important. But perhaps there's even a more fundamental aspect of MS. And in a way, this is the single most important ingredient to do Teshuvah. And in order to make significant change. And that is, as important as it is not to lie in your tax return, and as important as it is not to lie in your tuition forms, and as important as it is not to lie to your friend, don't lie to yourself. Don't deceive yourself. Because if you're going to change, we're going to have to be very honest with ourselves. Because even if we were ever to make a real accounting of our actions, and recognize that there are things that we're doing that are just plain wrong, what's the typical reaction that a person has to their shortcomings? Excuses, rationalizations. It's not my fault. It's my husband's fault. That's why I'm where I am. He doesn't respect me. You know why my whole life is this way? It's my second grade Rebbe's fault. I think he looked bad at me. He once gave me a bad look. That's why I'm like this. It's my principal's fault. He once looked at me wrong. My parents once hit me when I was 2 years old. That's why everything. It's not my fault. Excuses. That's what Shlomo HaMelech tells us in Koheles. Man is full of excuses. Holikim asas ha'adam yashar. God created man straight. And what we've been doing since the beginning of time is making cheshbonos. Vehema vikshu cheshbonos rabim. This pretty much sums up in a nutshell the human condition. We've been making excuses from the beginning of time. Rationalizations, terutzim, cheshbonos, reasons. Why I am what I am, and why I do what I do, and why I can't help it. Rebbe Shalom gives Adam Arishan one mitzvah. Just don't eat the fruit. And what does he do on the first day? He eats the fruit. And Hashem confronts him. Why do you eat the fruit? What does Adam Arishan say? The first excuse. The first rationalization. The oldest excuse in the book. Ha'isha asher nasata imadi. He nasnali. It's my wife's fault. The first recorded excuse in history. Chava's confronted. Why'd you do it? Not my fault. Nacha shushiani va'oichel. Someone else's fault. But nothing is my fault. I have an excuse. Cain and Hevel. Vayomer Cain el Hevel. Achiv. Vayehi biyoisam asada vayakom Cain el Hevel vayahargehu. And Cain said to his brother Hevel, and they were in the field, and Cain got up and he killed Hevel. And what did Cain say to Hevel? Vayomer Cain el Hevel blank. What did he say? It says the time Yonis Amenazir, he gave a whole drasha. He said, "Less din, less dayan." There's no God, there's no judge, there's no judgment. Less oilam acharon, less oiger tav l'tzadikah. There's no reward and punishment. A whole drasha, Cain said to Hevel. A whole teretz, a whole rationalization. So then why doesn't the Torah say what it is? Why doesn't the Torah say, "Vayomer Cain el Hevel, less din, less dayan"? There's no reward, there's no punishment. Says Rav Harari Raful. The Torah doesn't say what the excuse was. Because who cares what the excuse is? There's always an excuse. This excuse, that excuse, this rationalization. Who cares? It's all sheker. It's all a lie anyway. There's always an excuse. It's my wife's fault. It's my yeshiva's fault. It's the rabbi giving the Shabbos Shuva Drasha's fault. He can't, if only he would give a good Drasha. But it's not my fault. And there's a clinical syndrome. That's not my fault syndrome. But it's not my fault. Not me. And herein lies the greatest impediment to Teshuvah. Because in order to do Teshuvah, in order to say Vidoy, you have to recognize one thing. All the excuses and all the terutzim, it's all sheker. It's all not real. It's all a lie. And all the rationalizations. Yeah, minyan is important, but not for me, because I don't feel well in the morning. Or, I can't learn Gemara, I'm ADHD, don't you know? I don't have patience. Yeah, of course it's important to control your anger, but my temper is different. God doesn't expect me. And all the rationalizations, and all the excuses, and all the terutzim, and all the cheshbonos, they're all sheker. They're all a big lie. They're not true. George Bernard Shaw said, when it comes to self-deception, every man is a genius. And someone whose tax return is not honest, someone who's less than forthcoming on their tuition form. By the way, a friend of mine told me a beautiful story. His son applied for tuition assistance, beginning of the year based on his income, and he got it. And then sometime during the course of the year, he got a raise, and he called up the school. He said, look, I know you gave me a break, but I want you to know, I got a raise. How many of us would do that? And when you go to an amusement park, and it's cheaper for children under 12, and you tell your 13-year-old kid, who looks like he's 8 years old, you're 11, aside from the fact that you're stealing, and aside from damaging the DNA of your neshama, you're bringing sheker into your personality. And sheker is the roadblock to change. Because when there's sheker, then there's excuses and there are rationalizations. And there's no teshuvah. More than anything else, we want to raise good children. We're looking for the secret. We're looking for the trick. And we go to lectures, and we listen to shiurim, and we read books. What's the secret? There are no secrets. And there are no tricks. But says the Shlach HaKadosh, you want to make sure your kids stay straight, even when you're not around? Then teach them one thing. Teach them not to lie. More than anything else. More than telling them to learn, more than telling them to daven, more than telling them to have Erev Pesach matzos. Tell them not to lie. Now the story of George Washington and the cherry tree, that never happened. But the Shlosh says a similar story. The Shlosh says that he personally knew a chassid gadol, a very pious man. You could pay him all the money in the world, he would never lie. And the Shlosh said, I asked him, where does this midah come from? How do you excel so greatly in this midah? He says, look, when I was a kid, my father would say that if something breaks in the house or somebody does something wrong, if you admit it, you're off the hook. As long as you don't do it again. But if you deny it, and I catch you, boy, are you going to get it. And sure enough, when one of his children would admit to their guilt, the father would pay them. The father would reward them. And this is how he would train his children to grow up honest and straight. So that when one of the children would do something wrong, the child would say, Father, I can never tell a lie. It wasn't George Washington, but maybe his biographer was an avid reader of the Shlach HaKadosh. Hey, you never know. Rav Pam, Tzaddik, and Ish Emes. You ever wonder what it takes to produce a Rapam? Rapam once said about his mother, who lived to be her 90s, that all his life he never heard his mother say the word sheker. Because sheker is so disgusting, so despicable. Not he never heard her lie. He never heard her say the word sheker. She would say it's not true, sure it's a mistake, maybe there's a misunderstanding, but not the word sheker. She would not let that word come out of her mouth. And that makes a rosham. That influences a child. And the result was Rav Tam. We pray that the Rebbeinu Shalom guide us b'derech HaEmet, v'taher libenu, b'yavdecha be'emes. May the Rebbeinu Shalom bless us the year of Chayim, Parnasa, Nachas from our children, Agabench the year.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.